If oh yes, yes, boy,
Milk is
yes.
really changing the world for the better.
Or changing it back to what it used to be. To before these people started poisoning their bodies. Or to use his words, their divine engines.
See, I have no problem with amputees wanting to get augmentations.
Especially our soldiers. That's the least they deserve after defending our country. Like Taggart's patient, Ezekiel.
Right. And what happened to Ezekiel? He got himself a new limb that sent him into a spiral of despair because of the drugs. Essentially, what Bill Taggart is asking is, do we really want to have a world filled with addicts being forced to pay exorbitant amounts of money to a bunch of corporate neuropozyne pushers?
I just don't get why certain people have this loony idea that augmentations will make the world better.
Well, as you can see by what's going on out there, they have a lot of work to do to convince the world.
Okay, that was a good fight, like the ideological conflict, you might say, at the heart of this game. Is an interesting example for like how I don't know how to express it, but probably it would be something like interdependency. By the way, is actually nobody watching? Like I'm missing Mushroom a little bit, to be honest. Or the problem is that Mushroom doesn't have good enough internet to stream this one because because like the transcript allowing different qualities doesn't work, which would be kind of a shame, but yeah, I'm missing Mushroom a little bit. Okay, so what I wanted to say is the following. Yes, this dialogue is like, it seems that the main thing was like a pro or anti-augmentation, and then you have like different kinds of degrees of that with regards to, okay, hey, do you want like complete pureness, complete oh no, humans shouldn't mess with their bodies at all? Do you want regulations? Do you want like pure, okay, no, everybody should be able to do whatever they want? And then at that point that the guy made with like, okay, people get addicted by neuropozyne, because if they like, and I don't know if that's like purely an addiction, but like, as like if you don't take, like as like a simple bodily function, if you don't take neuropozyne, yo bro, what up? If you don't take neuropozyne regularly, your body will not accept the augmentations, so you're actually dependent on that. Problem is then that if these are massively financially inaccessible and people have to pay huge amounts of money to get them, that's of course problematic, because it, like, this dependency leaves them open for, okay, a massive amount of people being exploited because they are actually dependent upon that. They don't have any other choice but to actually take that medicine, to be exploited by pharmaceutical companies who set the prices that high for that stuff. The thing is, like, you can make, okay, you don't like the argument, and I don't think like, okay, that this is like a war of positions or something. This is a war of like well, basically the point that I want to make is that maybe this is an interesting example of a complex but still like a complex conflict that's still like, you can still orientate yourself, and it's not like hyper complex that you don't have no idea what the fuck is going on. Everything's connected to everything or so. Because it's not simply like pro or anti-org. This like idea of like, okay, like you can be pro-org, that people should be able to do with their bodies whatever the fuck they want, like as like a general principle. that the idea that there is something like a sacred human nature and body is fucking stupid. That at the same time you can say, no, I don't want people to be exploited by pharmaceutical companies to have to take these, to have to be that you say, no, there is no problem in being exploited by pharmaceutical companies setting the prices of these things so high. Which doesn't even mean like, okay, oh, it's like the evil pharmaceutical companies. It can simply be like the forces of competition and like squeezing out as much of a profit margin as possible. Simple as that. So that like nobody is at fault, but in the end things are shitty still. And then the question, like, I think the technical term for this is, as far as I know, a wicked problem. Wicked problem is where there is no one clear solution to something. That like, okay, basically whatever variable you change, you will have a bad outcome. So you have to change multiple things at once. And making something of like a simplified diagram of this would probably be interesting, and trying to come up with solutions of like, okay, seeing like how the central conflict in Deus Ex Human Revolution is like a system in its character, and how do you deal with like because there's no simple one-sided solution to this problem. How do you deal with a problem inside of like, how do you deal with a systemic, like a problem whose character is like, yeah, which is a wicked problem, which is a system. Yeah.
And do you know how he's going to influence legislation? How he's going to convince you this is really what you want? With fear! He's already started! Look outside, in our streets. Who do you think whipped up that frenzy? And I don't blame them, I blame people like Taggart, people who are constantly trying to divide us by our differences, instead of uniting us by our similarities. Listen, I've been a victim of this anti-Aug backlash. I was attacked simply for having been to a limb clinic. By people who were not augmented, people with an axe to grind. And do you know who saved me? An augmented man, a stranger! So you tell me where the real danger comes from. The Humanity Front is just that. A front. A front for hate-mongering and William Taggart's irrational need to keep us in the Dark Ages. I'm not here to tell you that augmentations will make the world a better place. I'm here to stand up for my right to choose. When Hugh Darrow discovered the secret of augmentation, he gave us the chance to better ourselves, to reach for limits that we couldn't even imagine before. Well, you've just heard William Taggart speak, and isn't he a smooth talker? He doesn't want you to better yourselves. He wants to limit you. He wants the government to have jurisdiction over your body. You want to get augmented? Oh, no. I'm sorry, but we're not gonna let you. You're not gonna let me? Ha! And do you know how he's gonna influence legislation? How
Okay,
he's
yeah.
going to
Get away from
convince
me,
you
man.
this is really what you
Man,
want?
the riot police are closing in.
With
Gonna lock
fear.
the whole place down.
He's already started! Look outside!
I'd be
in our
careful if I were you.
streets.
I've heard the
Who do you
protesters are
think whipped
totally
up
out of
that
control.
frenzy? And I
Are you
don't blame
for or
them.
against
I blame
human
people like
enhancement?
Taggart.
See,
people who
like
are constantly
questions like
trying to
these,
divide us by our
are you for
differences.
or like questions like these, which will be asked basically, and which we are being asked like all the fucking time in political conflicts and societal questions. These questions are under complex. They're like, in general, I can be for human enhancement, but I can also, like, for example, like my idea for now is like, okay, hey, I can be in general for human enhancement, but the point is human, and that's what I've been talking about also like last stream and from my order, self or objectification and scale stream, the bat stream, the mower stream. What it was, and this is something like, that's the thing, video games, and I'm not even joking here, like this is no cap. Video games are a good example, and especially like Deus Ex, where we can train how to think about these things with regards to real political conflicts and real social conflicts. Because in video games, the complexity of this kind of stuff is like the thing is, if we make a mistake here, that's like not a big deal. Like, yeah, it doesn't have any like it's like a training program. Like, think about Deus Ex as a mental training program for how do I figure out, how do I think about political conflicts adequately, and like, or not make methodological mistakes, and then like you can train, but the thing is you train in order to act with this in the real world. But training is of course like always simulated, always very limited, and yeah. So what I want to say is that questions like, okay, hey, are you for or against human enhancement? This question you can ask this question on, like, this question itself is misleading because it completely ignores the context in which human enhancement is taking place, and therefore, because different kinds of contexts will trigger different consequences. And that's an important point. And what is important is the consequences of something. If you take it as a pure principle of like, okay, hey, you're able to do more things than you were able to do before. Seems like a good thing. Okay, that also means you can do more bad things. Also true. But you can also do more good things. I know, hyper simplistic, but yeah. So, but what if, like, okay, you have like an amazing technology like human enhancement, and access to this is like what are the what is the context of access to this? Like, do the super rich and powerful get like, do only them get like access to this technology? Do they get like access to this technology in a form that's like vastly superior to that of the popular masses, or who like don't get access to this technology at all? I've recently watched Elysium again, which is a great fucking film. I like it very much. Which kind of like hints, it doesn't really ask this question directly, but it kind of hints at this question. And yeah. So in this case, I would say, hey, no, because the consequence of that is like, okay, like, it would only intensify the gap between like the large population and the super rich and the super powerful, and therefore have like an intensified social hierarchy, and not even only like an intensified, but also a stabilized social hierarchy, in the sense that it becomes less and less likely that this social hierarchy is actually resolved and closed over time, or like yeah, simply because the capacities are like, yeah, because the power gap grows much more. So in that area, I would be okay. Hey, I would be very much in terms of like legal regulations of that kind of shit. Of course, we must keep in mind that like, okay, legal regulations can be legal regulations are only like a countermeasure, in the sense you can still do these things. You only, in the ideal case, you get punished for it. That's the thing. And but like the person who wants to do it is always in the advantage because they always can do it. There's like nobody who really like, okay, like if you really restrict access to that kind of like, it's like, so there might be like some direct action that goes beyond legal measures might also make sense, but that cannot simply that can only complement the missing parts of legal action, that what legal action cannot do. But direct action cannot be like the alternative to legal action, to restriction. So I would be in favor of restriction as long as the consequences of human enhancement are the intensification of social hierarchy and the making it less and less likely that this hierarchy is being closed. The point then is, of course, like if you have a social hierarchy to begin with, the influence of people on the legal regulations and shit is, of course, like very much like you may be able to split the bourgeoisie and ideologically and say, okay, we align with that, like we have to align with a few powerful people who are also like, who are maybe very moral or something. Like they can be nice and good people, like they are not structurally, but like as persons. And so you can get some access to their resources and power, maybe, like at least like somewhat. And then the point becomes, okay, like, but yeah, the point is like, okay, hey, the influence over legal regulations is of course outsized, like way more on the side of the rich and powerful in general. So if it's in their interest to want, like, to intensify the social hierarchy and to like secure it, and human enhancement and augmentation is a way to do so, they can also cover that up, like in terms of like, oh, freedom, yeah, free choice, blah 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 blah. But yeah, and so the point is to split the bourgeoisie in that case along ideological lines, to somehow get some kind of power, because you need some form of that power. And the question is, okay, you need legal, like of course, then you need legal regulations, as long as the consequence of like widespread human enhancement would be the intensification of social hierarchy. Will that point of in time ever come, or will it not always fucking intensify that social hierarchy? And I'm like, the thing is, I don't know, but maybe we can, like, maybe there are specific ways of regulating access, of like not regulating, because that like puts regulated versus unregulated, of organizing the access, because access is always organized. The question is only how. It's not like regulated versus unregulated, but how do you organize the access to these technologies in a way that they don't intensify social hierarchy? For example, something like Medicare, something like access to healthcare, because that's in like on a little bit smaller scale. Like, it doesn't make you into demigods or shit with like literal augmentation, which are also like on a cognitive level and shit. But stuff like simply like life expectancy, and rather not like there's like really like where let's like a good example where something that's like seemingly very mundane has like gives you and doesn't look very spectacular, like really doesn't look like very cyberpunkish or anything, that like, okay, government provided healthcare is like a good example for like, okay, how can a technology that would otherwise, if it isn't organized, if the access to it isn't organized along egalitarian lines, does in fact intensify social hierarchy. Of course, not as much as human enhancement technologies, but yeah, that's like a good, like, where like, okay, hey, because like we're like, it's like a good example where something very mundane and something very real, where like something that also actually already exists, but also something we can very much like imagine, like, oh yeah, that's actually real, and it's not like, oh yeah, I don't know if that's even possible. Like that's like a way how to think about ways out of, like, how can you maintain medicine and yet don't have the negative effect of intensifying social hierarchy. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the toilet real quick.